Hi, this is Carl, also known as Zarepath in the Custom Magic community. I'm here to do another review of a set that's up for the custom standard rotation. The set I'm doing now is Ghariv, the Sacred City by marioware. Ghariv has a bunch of interesting mechanics. Custom standard, again, is a custom constructed format. People can vote on which set will rotate in, and then people will build decks and play each other using cards from the sets in custom standard. This rotation, there's 10 sets up, and I've been doing video reviews of each. I've done the first 3 so far, alphabetically: Eternia Whiterun, Descent from the Highlands, and Heirloom. And now we're doing Ghariv, the Sacred City. This is kind of a sideboardish card, but a very silver bullety. This is the influence mechanic, which is kind of like energy, except you can't spend the counters. So you're basically just ticking up the ladder and getting bigger effects with your influence cards. This is an interesting. This set cares about whether creatures have abilities or not, which I'm sure brings some kind of rules jank and debate. But it's an interesting thing because that matters with one of its mechanics, Assimilate, which we'll get to at some point. So a creature with 1 or fewer abilities, I feel like that's a lot of creatures, and then they gain 4 life. Arbitrate seems very strong. I think control decks would use this a lot. I think many decks would use this a lot. Probably too strong in current custom standard. I think there's a Centaur Tribal support. This is a bit slow. This is interesting, a 3/2 flyer for 3, although we already have that in standard in Custard right now, and it doesn't see much play. This is a wall that also gains you life, so definitely a good sideboard card against aggro. Okay, here's Suppression. A suppressed permanent loses all abilities and can't have or gain abilities. And it's often until that permanent can leave the battlefield. I feel like there's memory issues with this. It's kind of like Silence from Hearthstone, except they can't gain the abilities. It's hard to judge a lot of the influence cards because the effects often scale with the amount of influence you have, but I haven't seen any influence cards that give you more than 1 influence at a time. So if there's an influence deck that abuses influence, it's likely going to be all from this set. Yeah, Centaurs. Yeah, like this can be a 2/3, but only if your influence is 3 or greater, which makes this not playable in my opinion, because the strength of 1-drops in aggro decks, like the decks that want strong 1-drops, need them for consistency's sake, not to eventually be an above-rate body. Two, 3 vigilance for 2. I don't know if that's good enough, even once you get the 3rd influence. It might be interesting if all the influence just required the flat threshold of 3, as opposed to the varying scales by design. I don't know for sure. And sorry, I've lost a bit of my voice. I had to speak at church yesterday, and then I've been doing these videos also. Suppressing things. I mean, this suppression is good against planeswalkers, I guess, against artifacts with special abilities, and mana dorks. It's not just activated abilities, but mana abilities as well. But that still feels situational enough to be a sideboard thing. Like, does this stop Prestige? It might be nice out of the sideboard against Dragon Hatchling, against Yeah, I guess that's really one of the only cards that immediately comes to mind as something that you'd want to suppress. Oh, flag bearers, interesting. Oh, centaur flag bearer. Okay, this guy can continually give you influence. Creatures you don't control, power less than or equal to your influence, can't attack or block. Well, if you already have built up a lot of influence and then play this, then that shuts down what they can do. I don't know that I like the design. Like, I appreciate that it's a nice swingy effect that makes you want to get lots of influence, but the reward being your opponent doesn't get to play magic maybe isn't the most ideal thing. 6 mana, you get 2 flyers. When she attacks, you put a counter on everything else. Probably a bit slow, but maybe in the Centaur deck. I don't know. I doubt you can make a Centaur constructed deck out of these cards that would be competitive, but you never know. This is interesting. You can either make a wall or 2 tokens. I like that card. Interesting flexibility. If you attacked with a page, there's a lot of creature type caring in the set, and I kind of wish that it was narrowed down to a fewer number of creature types to care about. Like suddenly pages matter, but I didn't really get that the first time I skimmed through the set. So this is no ring of a creature, but then you can also suppress all creatures that, whoa, that share a creature type with the exiled card. So I guess if types matter, this is an interesting way to deal with that also. So we have influence, suppression. Okay, now we're going on to blue. Blue also has influence. Broken Will is an interesting counter spell. Seems like a fine design. This wouldn't always see play in Custard because there's all the big decks that ramp up to bigger things with Garrick and Farseek. But there's also decks that like staying pretty low to the ground. And I like that that tool would exist. I always like my Omen speakers, so that's great. Oh, another 4-spike design that can get bigger with your influence. Reprise, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but it allows you to add it to other instant sorcery spells you cast. I think this card by itself is not good. Oh, pardon. Just because there's no card advantage in it. But the fact you can cast it twice, I suppose, almost makes it worth it. I've noticed there's a lot of designs in this set that counter something unless your opponent pays a certain amount of mana. And I think too much of that is probably not healthy. It's not the funnest kind of interaction to have as an opponent, to feel like you're constantly being taxed and you're afraid to cast anything. I like the aesthetics of this design in particular, though. It's almost unblockable, and it's almost an onboard counterspell. Well, I mean, if it didn't have the first ability at all, I guess this would still be quite good. But as is, this is a very strong tempo card. And blue kind of is lacking a strong 1-drop creature for tempo right now, so that would be a nice thing. This delays a spell, but you could reprise it too. That's interesting. Although a counterspell on reprise is a little weird because I don't know. There's timing issues with that. Nice simple design. Could that see play? Yeah, I could see that seeing play. Then it's like a better think twice as long as you're casting other spells. Yeah, that could be quite strong. One thing I dislike is I did notice a lot of designs that have when you reprise onto a spell, such and such happens. But on those cards, it doesn't say what reprise does, and so it's a little confusing for new players to read the card. Like, I don't actually know what this does. Also, I generally dislike when a design seems to require lots of other cards to specifically signal it and give you a bonus when it happens. I'd rather the mechanics bonus just stand on its own. Um, that might see play, I don't know. Yeah, more when you reprise. You can suppress. The thing is, suppress is such a situational bonus. Like, your opponent has to happen to have the things that are worth suppressing. Um, and I'm not a big fan of it as a mechanic. This is a fun design. Uh, I don't know if it sees play and constructed. Wow, this is an interesting tool. You can make them wheel their hand, but only if you want. Like, you get to see their hand first. That seems very strong as a tempo card. Like, if they happen to have the sweeper or the counter spell or whatever that you're worried about, you make them stick that on the bottom of their deck. Oh, there's pages again. I forgot about that. So maybe there was more page support than I thought. I mean, this can get you 3 cards. That's pretty good. But it requires pages, which I doubt are in much in Custard right now outside of this set. Persuasive Distraction. Probably not good enough. The reprise cost is a little high. Oh, this is a stopgap for influence. I don't like the capitalization in the all caps and the flavor text here. It's an interesting ability, not for Custard, but oh, unblockable 2 in prowess, as long as you own a card in exile. Well, how do you put a card in exile? By doing reprise. Well, that's kind of an interesting synergy. Okay. This is an interesting build around. If there's something you want to cast that costs a lot more than 6 mana, like an Omniscience or something, this can help you get there. It can also help you look for it. But if you find anything else, you're unlikely to be able to cast it. So, kind of a fun design. Altar's Reap. Okay, assimilation is another mechanic. What happens is when you assimilate a card, you exile the assimilated card, and the thing that assimilated it becomes that thing's host, which is kind of flavorful, and it gains all those abilities. So assimilate and suppress fight each other in this set. Like, there's a definite conflict between mechanics. It also requires that there be a lot of creatures with activated abilities, or that with abilities. Well, I guess menace and flash and things like that are abilities. Although suppress, yeah, suppresses all abilities of cards. So assimilate is likewise a little situational, for my opinion. Although I forgot, I'd mentioned that, what would you even want to suppress? Maybe Dragon Hatchling. But I realized all the keywords that red has, those are worth suppressing, or that any creature has. You can't really suppress haste and things like that, because you'd want to be doing that instant speed, and I don't think there's a lot of instant speed suppression. 'Cause, 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 'cause Whenever they lose life, they reveal their hand. Seems like a lot of triggers. Probably a bit slow. Oh, for a second I thought this was 1 in a black, not 4 in a black. Alright, this is interesting removal. Destroy target creature whose power and toughness aren't equal. It's very strong. That does interesting things to a format. I like it. I think it's a sweet design. It makes deck building a little bit different in a different way. So you can assimilate cards in your graveyard. So if you have something flying in haste, you can assimilate it. This guy has flying in haste. Assimilate is kind of interesting. This is an aristocrat's card. That's pretty strong, I think. You combine that with parasitic wall hugger, and you're draining for 3 with each creature token you sacrifice. Pair that with some creature token makers like Vayne and the black one for 1 in a black, Boiling Outflow. You can see that. This is a really interesting design. Feels very Black Demon. It's strong, 4 mana, 6/6 flying menace. But when it enters play, your target opponent, controls you during your next turn. So it encourages you to be like very careful about what effects you have and what you want them to be able to do or not do. This probably ends up being unplayable, but the challenge of making it playable is kind of interesting. However, the feel bads have got to be enormous if you forget something that they can do on your turn that can actively hurt you. Like, oh, I'll save this removal spell. Oh, they're just gonna like two for nothing me. Okay, some more. Okay, so it looks like they did pick a specific threshold of 3 or greater, but then there's other designs. Okay, so now hags are a thing that matter too. Fester. This is a huge removal spell. A non-hag creature almost means nothing in the context of Custard, so this is just 2 mana instant, -5/-5. This is a Suicide Black card. It's interesting, you can throw it at them over and over, and if they block it and kill it, then you can put this on the blocker, and the blocker starts making them take 1 life a turn. This is kind of a black 1-drop. I mean, it has to be unblocked to deal 2 damage. Okay, you can remove counters with this thing. A little situational. This is a good removal against token decks and go wide decks, which is probably would be good in Custard right now. Whenever you get an influence counter, return this from your graveyard to your hand. A little parasitic. And I know it's okay for sets to have those kinds of parasitic triggers in them, but I feel like this already has a lot of that with Reprise. And yeah. This is a really wordy common. There's so many words on it, I thought it was going to be really good. Oh, this is worthless. Attacked with a page. Pages want to attack, apparently. Necrotic Buffet. Whenever you self-mill a creature, you get a hag that can't be blocked unless they pay 2 for each creature blocking it. I don't think I like that form of evasion. Okay, some more hag stuff. Okay, Reeve Soul. It's actually, oftentimes that's seen play when it was in Wizard's Standard. So this assimilates a creature an opponent controls. This seems really below rate. and situational. Like they have to have the creature. Oh wait, no, it exiles the assimilated card. It doesn't just take the abilities, it just straight up exiles it. Okay, well that's something. 6 mana is still quite a lot. I think I might like this better as a 5 mana 2/2 or 5 mana 3/3. It's a Chupacabra that steals the abilities. That's pretty sweet. Okay, sacrificing other creatures get influence. Seems like a lot of the influence cards designs, like influence needs all the cards to work together to make a powerful influence deck, but they all seem to be asking, they have different kinds of hoops and different payoffs that don't necessarily all fit in the same deck. I'd be curious if marioware has seen some influence decks built that, you know, have a streamlined game plan. Oh, a spell with lifelink. And gain you 4 life, deal 2 damage to a player and to a creature. This is probably unplayable unless you have a lot of influence. This is an interesting design. You either put something in your graveyard, which can be good with some of the designs in this set and in many sets, right? If you play this in Isemerge, you can find your Izalith and put it in your graveyard. But if you have sufficient influence, you can instead go and find your re-emerge, and if you need that, just put it directly into your hand. Problem is, it's parasitic with influence. I don't know what other influence cards. Maybe Thought Persecution? That feels bad. You would go into Isemerge to make this a worthwhile design. It's the problem with mechanics that are very insular and parasitic like that for constructed formats. It either makes one deck that's very, very strong and will not get any more tools or texture from other sets, or it's not going to see play in anything because it's too insular and parasitic and there's not enough other cards to make it worthwhile to bring it in. So I kind of like the idea of package design where, you know, Energy had a package and then some other synergy cards to go with it. The problem is the package was so strong that you always have to be running the package of, you know, the Attune with Ether and the red removal spell and the blue draw spell. Like, just that package by itself was so good. And then the thing that made, you know, flying tokens. Oh, adaptive is another mechanic. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only this creature, you can pay its mana cost and copy it. I dislike adaptive for constructed because it seems very situational, like some of the other mechanics. Although, to be fair, my critique of suppress and assimilate being situational, I keep forgetting that it can steal normal abilities like First Strike and Menace, which makes it way less situational than I think I originally realized. But how often are you casting instant and sorcery spells on specifically creatures with this kind of mechanic? I don't know how often that's going to happen. And you already have a spell recursion copying thing with the reprise. So I don't know. This is an interesting design. It gives you lots of creatures at once. Even though the eggs don't do anything, it kind of asks you, well, what are you going to do with these eggs? So for some kind of aristocrat style thing, or a go wide deck that has auras, or not auras, but anthems, this costs less for each instant sorcery in your graveyard, which is exciting. It has more of the reprise, but it doesn't have reprise on it. Bonuses. Maybe in a blue-red spells deck, that could be fun. Yeah, I bet there could be a fun blue-red spells deck with reprise and clairvoyant. Oh, would that see play? It makes 3 tokens with haste for 4 mana. That might see play in decks that want it. This is kind of a fun card. I don't know if it gets there. Wait a minute. Okay, when you cast a copy, or when you copy a spell, you're not casting it, right? It's just copied. I was wondering if you could go infinite on adaptive, play Giant Growth, and then pay its mana cost to copy it, and then target it again, and then, you know, just Giant Growth forever. But I don't think you can, because you copy it and you don't choose new targets. It's only cast once. The copies aren't cast. This is kind of strong. I like this design. That might be worth playing in some grindier decks that want a little bit of red removal. This is a board wipe for 6. And it also stops their lands from untapping on their next turn. That's kind of an interesting... I think it's a color bend, because 10 damage, like, it might as well just be a black board wipe, right? But this makes big red a little interesting. Instant speed, 2 damage to everything with reprise. That's big. Being able to just add 2 damage to everything to the next instant or sorcery you cast can be really good, especially against those decks with Hollow Mechanic or other ways to get creatures back from the graveyard after you destroy them all. Having the ability to also get your board wipe back for a cheaper cost is kind of fun. Oh. Would this see play? I don't know. It's a little bit... it gives you some card advantage. Yeah, get out of here, notification. Whenever any source deals damage to one of the creatures, this gets bigger. Whenever source deals damage to an opponent, you get to impulse draw. I like that design. I think red right now wants to be finishing the game with costs like this, but I appreciate designs that say, here's an engine for a longer game if red would like it, that still ask them to do what red likes to do, dealing damage to things. I like that design a lot. Oh, okay. That's kind of cool against things with lots of counters on them. If it's a +1/+1 counter, remove those counters, then deals 4 damage to its base toughness, which is cool. This is an interesting removal spell. This would, this and Phoenix Flames together, I mean, that would be a lot of 3 mana, deal 4 damage sorceries. And make for some burn. And you could have an interesting controlling red deck that can use those things to destroy creatures if it needs to, or also be its win condition. And it can already do that with Phoenix Flames, but when you have 8 Phoenix Flames, then it can become a whole strategy, which would be interesting. It's something I would try to build. You have, this is a strong card. This is Arc Lightning, except it can also go face if you attacked with a page. All of the page bonuses cost 3 mana. I think there's 1 in each color. I'm going to assume it's a limited sideways strategy. I don't know. Now it's kind of janky but fun. I like the design. Oh, this could see play in red. Just mono red, having 3 power with your 2-drop. Then when it dies, it can get rid of something. I mean, it goes into 4/4s pretty well. This is a very pushed red 2-drop. 2/3 for 2 is an odd thing to see on a red creature, although when I think about it, there was a red common like that in Theros or Born of the Gods, which then had an additional ability. It just attacked each turn if able. I mean, this is quite a bonus. This seems a little pushed. I'd like to see it nerfed down a little bit. Like, I could see this just as a 2/2 and being strong. And one of the reasons I want to see it pushed down a bit is red already has some ridiculous 2-drops with the Dragon Hatchling. Yeah, this is just like the energy one. except in some ways more problematic, except, well, that one gives you 3, and this one only gives you 1. And that's the issue with the influence cards, is they always look unappealing on their own because they all only give you 1 when you first do it. And you're like, well, what am I going to do with 1 damage, or a card with CMC 1 or less? And then I assume the deck that wants it slowly builds up, and then everything starts feeling a lot stronger. But starting below rate feels a little bad. Alright, you get a token, and you deal damage to a player, and you can reprise it. That's neat. Players can't gain life, can't prevent damage. A little big for... See, that seems push things that are pushed for constructed, but it seems a little big for that. I don't know. Though I guess once they start gaining life and preventing damage, it's a little later in the game, and maybe the 5-drop becomes more relevant for that. This can ramp your non-creature spells. That's kind of cute. I like this design a lot because it brings its mechanic to other cards. So this could go into a blue-red spell tempo aggro deck that exists in Custard, because it gives spells in the graveyard with prize of 0. So this is a card that I would enjoy playing with. Okay, I really like Abundant Harvest. It's like Season's End, except instead of for each CMC, it's for each permanent type. I like that card a lot. I would play that in the dredge decks I'm always trying to make. I wonder if that's playing sideboards against mono red, because that's not a horrible rate. A 4 mana 2/5 that can remove a creature and then block pretty profitably. I don't know if this gets there. Oh yeah, it does. You either get a card or you get a ramp. That's really strong, actually. Okay, more centaurs. And foxes, hexproof. Um, so you reveal the top card of your library. It lets you sometimes draw lands. It's a little dirtly. Oh, you can give hexproof to your centaurs. Oh, Hunter's Prowess. I remember that. It's a lot of green mana symbols. For Beast Tribal, that's a new one. I think there might be too much tribal here. Oh, that's really cool. I like to imagine this could see play. Some kind of mid-range thing. Wow. That's kind of fun. I like that design. I really like Meandering Mossback. The idea is you play it, and it can assimilate a land after you mill something. So this would also go in my dredge deck. And then it becomes an Elvish Mystic. But you have to hit a land, right? But if you don't hit the land, and you already benefit from self-mill, this is a great card. I would love to play that in my dredge deck. What does this one do? Oh, okay. I haven't noticed pages, but they must exist. I also haven't been looking for them specifically. Alright, this is an adaptive card that seems possibly pushed for constructed. 2/4 for 3 mana. Spells you control target a creature you control. Can't be countered. So it's just kind of an anti-counter ability here. I guess that encourages you to go all in on something. I don't know. Okay, so you assimilate stuff from your hand to make this bigger, and it counters a card disadvantage by letting you draw more cards as you do it. That's still a lot of investment, one creature. Probably not a custard player, but a fun design. Assimilate makes for some really wordy commons, unfortunately. Some more counter hate. That might feel bad in the set, because Influence wants you to build up slowly and you can't spend it. And so just suddenly losing all your counters just ruins the deck. And the Influence cards really want you to build a whole deck around it, because they don't do enough by themselves. Oh, seems like a lot of these sets have green 3/2 trample in them. I imagine there must be some combos you could do with Assimilate. Like, are there creatures with really crazy abilities? Or conflicts of abilities like flying, lifelink, first strike, haste, and being able to assimilate them on cheaper bodies makes those bodies really strong. It's an interesting Johnny question. Oh, this is strong. Verdant Rebirth. Is this a reprint of a WotC card? I think it is. Yeah, from Ixalan or something. Or from Rivals. Maybe a Stompy card. Okay, now we're into the hybrid. There's a lot of hybrid in this set. There's not an explicit reason, just like there's not an explicit reason why there's so much tribal. I think it's just because marioware wanted it, and that's fine, as long as the designs are fine. I think it makes the set overall feel less purposeful and have a clear setting and direction, which is kind of a knock against it. But I think that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be that way, I suppose. And a lot of these designs are fun enough on their own. This is an interesting control finisher, because it can't be countered, but it can't protect itself, but it goes back into your library. And so for those really grindy decks, that's okay if their finisher's removed, because it's going to be coming back later. And Flash gives it some amount of protection as well. You can flash in at the end of their turn. Okay. This goes in a prize deck. I don't know if that would exist. When their stuff dies, deal damage. That's too dirtily. Huh. Oh, yeah. That's weird. Okay, Planeswalkers. I really like the text of the +2 because it's fun for multiplayer. It also synergizes with the -2 for dealing damage to them. That's a red text that I enjoy. Red punishing people for having too many cards encourages people to play their cards. It feels like a very red thing to do. I don't like the emblem because opponents aren't always going to be wanting. Yeah, it just seems too situational. Not every deck wants to be drawing cards outside of their main draw step. Maybe this sees play. It ramps you and is a good body. Wants to be aggressive. This is a pseudo fog, but also a blink of everything that could see play. Okay, this is a centaur. This is a constructed playable card. You can pay extra to put counters on creatures. Oh, it has to be a centaur. Never mind. Oh, this is Liberated Armory on a double strike body. Holy crap. I don't think I understand how strong this is. This is incredibly strong. And this would need to be nerfed, in my opinion. Because Liberated Armory, I'm a little worried about. Like, just making tokens. Yikes. I mean, this is a 2/3 double strike for 3, which is already really strong. and then the fact that when it dies you still have equipment left over, and the fact that anytime any creature enters it comes in bigger, and then if that creature dies you still have the equipment, and you put that equipment on your double strike. This is far too strong in my opinion. I think it should probably cost 4, and even then it would be very strong. Suppression. Huh. Beginning of each upkeep. Suppression doesn't seem necessarily fun. A lot of the fun of creatures are their abilities. That's what makes them unique, and this kind of removes that. Trample and Death Touch is kind of an odd combination. Players don't realize it can deal 1 damage to the creature and the rest to face. Oh, and you can make other things assimilate it. I like that assimilate is a focus from the graveyard, like turning your graveyard into an assimilate toolbox. I think that's a good design choice. 3 mana Planeswalker. Seems fine. It doesn't really have an ultimate per se. It's more like just a bunch of different tools. Hag Tribal. This is another ridiculous card, 3/4 haste for 3, which is also Birthing Pod. That's just kind of absurd. It has a problem that I'm noticing with a lot of overly pushed designs, where they have a really strong ability, but it's like the design isn't confident in itself, and so they make sure it also has a ridiculous body, like to really make sure it sees play. And as someone who enjoys brewing and deck building, it just feels obnoxious to me. It's like, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to play the card. It doesn't make me feel, happy or clever. It just feels like I've been told what to do by the designer, whether I want it for the body or the ability. I feel obligated to use the ability if I wanted it for the body and vice versa. I like this with Reprise because it can put more Reprise cards into your graveyard. I think it's a good design. Oh gosh, this is a common. This it's interesting. MarioWare seems very aware of the possibility of like a Zatalpa getting assimilated, and so it makes sure that creatures can only assimilate something with less power. Or there, I've noticed other conditions on the assimilate cards. It kind of makes it a little less fun, but probably more safe. Oh, okay. So this is a Banishing Priest for 4, but if you have enough influence, you can just completely exile it instead of exiling it until this leaves. I really dislike this design. I really dislike onboard counterspells, onboard taxing that they're going to feel dumb if they forget about it, and it can just really shut down, grind down the games. You're going to want to keep 3 mana up. They're going to want to keep at least 1 mana up. Yeah. The -7's a little situational, but you can build around it at least. And the +1 and -2 only care if they have creatures. Holy smokes. This is a bonkers card. I can see this costing 6 and still being very strong. It's probably way too strong. Hey, I'm doing a video right now. Do you need something?
What a light on?
So that they can see me in the video.
Oh.
Thank you, Adam. Oh. Oh, I was like, well, why is this white? I guess the final ability is kind of white. Just exile, straight up exile a creature. This is a very strong card. Um, yeah, this could be worth playing. Um, you can exile their cards. This is mostly for the loyalty and to fuel the 4/4 stealing abilities. You know, I obviously have not been very high on suppressing and stealing abilities. Assimilate I like because I love the graveyard and I love, kind of Johnny things like that. But it might play much better than I'm giving it credit for. I'm kind of used to Magic only caring about activated abilities, which for some reason just isn't appealing to me. But maybe I'm being a little harsh on that as a major theme. Yeah, again, I don't think I like the taxing evasion. Another way for opponents to lose all counters. Okay, crematory wagon. That's a lot like a design I have in Metropolis. Except in Metropolis, I have to name out all the different abilities, and this will just give it all the abilities. So this is a really fun Johnny card. I bet there's something cool you could do with this. Okay, another influence thing. Okay, and the lands, these seem very strong. You have to have a colored permanent, right? You just have to have played anything, and then these are untapped forever. This is using suppression for non-basic land hate is interesting. Although you're going to have to do it on their upkeep because they can add mana in response. And this does block mana abilities. And yeah, oh, yeah, this would be necessary for the influence package. Having lands that give you influence, a lot like the energy land. Okay, so that is Ghariv. Um, some interesting themes with abilities matter. I like the assimilate designs a lot, generally. Reprise could be very interesting. Reprise. I don't like that suppress and assimilate fight each other a lot. I'm not entirely convinced about abilities matter as a theme, but I appreciate that a lot of thought has been put into it. There's a lot of designs in here that I would have fun. I'd love to play with. There's a lot of others I also mentioned that likely seem too strong and could use tweaking. I don't know that I like the way Tribal's done, kind of some random tribes, but I appreciate that they're different and new, and that they do seem to have support within the set. Except for the Beast one, I'm not as sure about that one. That might have just been a one-off design, and Wizards does that every now and then. Anyway, very interesting set. Thank you, marioware, for submitting it, and I hope this was helpful for those who are voting for the custom standard rotation later this week. Thank you for watching.